the course access, I put a few links up there. Hopefully you can see them through this. If you want access to the entire course, that bit.ly link /flipss will get you there, as well as the other ways that we posted it. And then this presentation itself is a Google Drive document, so you'll also have access to this document itself. There's going to be a lot of information here, not all of it I can get to, but with that bit.ly link, the flipss pres, you'll be able to access any videos or link that is going to be in here. The other thing is we're recording this. I'm actually screencasting my screen right now with video, so I will be posting this within the course. Okay. So again, if you need to maybe duck out or you can't watch this whole thing, this will be archived and put into the course. All right, some more contact information there quickly before we begin. Okay, on Twitter, I'm at Mr. Driscoll. That's my Flipped History blog account, and flippsocialstudies.com is the LMS that I use with my students. Okay, so for this seminar, I promise to show you how flipped learning can empower positive change. Now that may seem kind of vague and cryptic right now, but in a way I want to keep it open because part of this is about teacher-led innovations and changes in your classroom. So not everything that I did may work for you. You may have a lot of other ideas, but hopefully this will get you thinking in a new direction. Now, as far as what we're going to cover, we're going to start out with the problem. Okay, a couple years ago, I switched districts, started a new teaching position. I was faced with some new challenges that I hadn't encountered before. Then we'll go through my journey into flipped learning, how I started out with some of the basics of what some call Flipped 101, all the way to what I'm doing today. And then I'll discuss kind of the broader changes regarding flipped classroom and its new move towards what many refer to as flipped learning. Okay, then after that we'll talk about some of the results, okay, from my classroom but also from other people around the country. And then implementation advice. Once you decide, okay, maybe I want to try this flipped learning, what are some tips on how to get started, how to put this into practice? And I've had quite a learning curve. Okay, everything hasn't always worked. Okay, so I'll give you some advice. Hopefully it'll change, or at least make it go a little bit quicker for you. You won't have the same pitfalls that I ran into. Then probably the most important part of this is the community of practice. So beyond just this, we have the course that's set up that will have this archive, but I'll also introduce you to one document that has 150 educators from around the world that do this. So I'll introduce you to them. I'll introduce you to some Twitter chats and how to connect. But that's really the point of this, is to get people thinking about how to put flipped learning into practice in social studies around the world. And then I'll finish up with a quick final thoughts on moving forward, where I think the future of flipped learning is going, as well as a Q&A session. So we're going to try to leave at least 15 minutes at the end for that. So again, I may not get to everything in this presentation, but it will be archived, the document itself, in the course. We're all set then. Okay, so fall of 2011, I ended up changing school districts, and things were going well. My first 5 years of teaching went well. I liked the district, but I wanted to change, and I wanted to join this new community. And I was just really excited to start. Okay, and my focus for this year was going to be creating more engaging lectures. I thought that was something that my class is maybe a little bit lacking, that I wanted to focus on. As a history teacher, I really thought that there was a lot of value to lecturing in class, that there was a lot of value in good storytelling. Now, there's a huge problem. Okay, and part of this were a few different factors. One, the new students that I was teaching, there was an extreme lack of engagement. Okay, at least compared to my last district. They just didn't seem to really care about the content. Another part of that was classroom management issues. I felt like some of the students, we not just were drifting, but some of them were just actively trying to disrupt and really destroy the lecture. And I don't know if it was to gain attention or to avoid doing a task or whatever, but there was a lot more classroom management issues. And at the end of the day, the students weren't learning. They weren't getting the lessons. They weren't understanding the topics and themes that I was going over in these lectures. So I was trying to come up with some reasons, and I started, unfortunately, in hindsight, I started faulting the students in the learning environment involved. For example, I thought that some of these students maybe just didn't have a good work ethic. Maybe they had bad attitudes. Maybe the problem was that there was such a wide range in ability levels in the class. So for instance, for each class, I had maybe a 2nd to 10th grade reading level, which was a pretty big span. And then lastly, I thought maybe a student's preparation prior to my class, whether it be that day, but also maybe the last 10 years of schooling. Again, this was a 10th grade course. Maybe they just weren't prepared for the content that I was delivering. Now, this was and always will be a terrible mindset. It wasn't necessarily a problem with the students or the new population of kids that I had. It was with my instructional practices. It was the way that I was approaching teaching, and that had to change. So this is the new way I thought about it. I said, how can my instructional design and practice evolve in a way that effectively addresses all students' needs, regardless of their situation? So take what I got. Okay, these are the students, these are their ability levels, these are some of the issues they're dealing with. How can I change the way I teach to reach all of them? So I started to look for some solutions on how to make some of these in-class direct instruction sessions better. I started to try to use more technology. So for instance, using the rapid response system or student response system, some people call them clickers, to try to make them more interactive. For the students who are falling behind, I tried to make fill-in-the-blank slide handouts so that they could kind of keep along without writing down everything. And then maybe I just wasn't managing the kids well behaviorally. So what are some new techniques? Needless to say, a lot of this stuff didn't work. At the end of the day, I was running into a lot of the same problems. So then, luckily, I just came across what is now referred to in hindsight as the flipped classroom. And I did this through some research that I was doing at Teachers College through Columbia University. In the fall, I was doing a part-time master's program while I was teaching. And the class that I was in was about democratizing learning through technology. So I tried to tie in the flipped classroom with some of my research, and that's what really introduced me to this concept. And this question, which was asked by John Bergman, who's really one of the pioneers of the flipped classroom movement, he said, what's the best use of your face-to-face class time? And once I started to really consider that, I started to think it's probably not a lot of direct instruction lecture. There's probably other ways that I could do this that would maximize my time with them while also using technology to help me with this. All right, so I'm going to get into my journey here. I started out fall of 11. I start doing some of these flipped classroom practices. The first stage or first iteration of what I did is called Flip 101. And that's what John Bergman and Aaron Sams in their book on flipped learning refer to as kind of the introductory stages to flipped learning and flipped classrooms. So what I did was I took direct instruction, or in my case lectures, I put them online and out of the group learning space. And I did this with screencasting technology. So in essence, I took what I would have done as an in-class lecture, recorded it with my computer, posted it online for the kids to view. Now the way this worked was the videos were assigned for homework, and what was traditionally homework was now completed in class. So in essence, the only thing they ever had to do at home was watch the video lectures, and now everything else that we would engage in class was done in class. So for social studies, for instance, we spent more time on document analysis, maybe we'd have some debates, write research papers, analyze primary sources, all of those things that you would do in a social studies class. Now, reflecting on it, there were some advantages and disadvantages to this flipped 101 style. The advantage was that I had more time to work individually with my students and build relationships with them. And that's huge. That's what I think is one of the biggest advantages to flipped learning, is that you have the time to really engage and connect with your kids. Another advantage was that this direct instruction was permanently archived for remediation and review. Now kids could always go back and view my videos, view my lectures. The kids that maybe needed to watch it 2 or 3 times, it was there for them. And also at the end of a semester, say for an exam or a unit test, they could go back and see it. Now right there on the screen is a screenshot from my Flipped History YouTube channel. You're also going to see in this presentation that I have a lot of links. You can't click them now necessarily, but once you get access to this presentation, which I'll put into the course, which if you contact me I could also send you the link, you'll be able to access all of these things. But anyway, that is an example of the playlist from my world history class. Also, students are learning with a medium that they're comfortable with. A lot of them are comfortable learning on YouTube. 3 to 5 minute instructional videos are something that a lot of people go to now. For instance, one person said an example is, if you ask a kid how to tie a bow tie, and you ask them how to go find out how to do that, adults would typically say, oh, maybe I'll look in a book or ask a friend, where they typically would say, the students would say, I'm just going to go on YouTube and find a 3-minute video on how to make a bow tie. Okay, so it's just something that they're comfortable with, that they're used to doing. It also minimized distractions. A lot of the students that either were bored or just trying to get attention, they couldn't do that because there wasn't a whole lot of direct instruction for the whole group anymore for them to distract people. And also, when some students were watching the videos in class, which I did let them do, especially in the second iteration of it, they had their headphones and they may be looking at the computer, viewing the video. It was a lot harder to distract them. So in a way, it kind of got rid of some of those problems. However, not everything was perfect. There were some drawbacks to this approach. The first one is that a lot of the students complained about the videos themselves. They said I had poor audio quality, which, back then I don't argue with. I had one of those cheap $5 analog plug-in mics, and it sounded like I was underwater. It was fuzzy. It was terrible. My videos were too long as well. I made them almost the length of an in-class lecture. They're not necessarily going to be engaged for 25 minutes watching me talk about history. Okay, so that was one of the problems. They were too long and they were too much just like an in-class lecture. And they also thought that there was just not as much excitement and engagement with it, partly because I wasn't used to making screencast videos at that time. I didn't realize how much emphasis you had to put into your voice and trying to make it not just a talking head where you had video incorporated, you had simulation. So those were some of the big critiques. The other issue was tech issues and access. For instance, my school blocks YouTube, which was incredibly frustrating. So I had to find other ways around that, and I ended up settling on Vimeo, which the school district does not block, but there were a few technical things that we had to deal with. The biggest drawback, though, were some students just simply refused to view them at home. And if you remember back, one of the big parts of this is that they would have the homework videos. It would be for homework. So what if they don't watch the video for homework? Then what? Okay, that became a problem, and I had to deal with that. So that was something that I had to consider for the second iteration, is what about the students who can't watch it at home or just simply don't do it? Okay, so beyond Flipped 101, the second iteration that I went to is called Flipped Mastery. And John Bergman and Aaron Sams described that in their book about how they merged the two, and this was their second iteration as well. So again, spring 2012, I'm about a half year into flipping, I changed to Flip Mastery. To summarize this approach, what I did is I utilized instructional videos as a tool in a self-paced mastery learning approach. Now, mastery learning is not new. It's been around for a long time, but a lot of teachers haven't tried it because it's so hard to manage. The way it works is that students progress as they demonstrate mastery of objectives or of tasks or demonstrate proficiency, and that's the only time they move ahead. So what I did is I took these instructional videos and I tagged them to certain learning tasks. These learning tasks were then aligned with objectives and goals that I had for them, and they worked through in a self-paced style. Now, another change here is that I didn't require it for homework. Not every single video was homework. They watched the video when they needed it. So, for instance, if they were on, and I have a screenshot from one of my objective grids there, say they were on objective 5.5, okay, and they had to do an assignment on the profile of Anne Frank, and there was a video aligned with that, that's when they would watch the video. It could be in class, it could be at home, whatever they needed. But everybody was at their own pace. So this Flip Mastery really changed things up for me, and there were some positives. I'll start with that. The first thing is it encouraged student responsibility and self-regulated learning. They had to keep track of the objectives that they've mastered. They had to learn how to pace themselves. They had to learn how to be on task. And also, they had to know when to ask for help. And that was a big thing, is that a lot of times I had to prod students, oh, do you need help? And they would say no, but then I'd find out they really did. Okay, so that was a big part of it, is them teaching them to know when to ask for direct instruction during class. It also increased student-to-student interactions. Okay, so now my lecture was moved out of the classroom online. Now they had time to grapple with these things, and a lot of them created groups. It was really an organic thing. I didn't assign groups at all. They actually just started to form groups on their own and tackle these objectives and work together, which I thought was unbelievable. Some chose not to. Okay, if they wanted to work individually, they could, but most of them did end up working in small groups. The other thing is it gave me more ability to differentiate my instruction. So, for instance, if they're working through at Mastery and I realize a couple students needed some different type of instruction, I would just adjust it on the fly. I do a lot more formative assessments, see if they mastered it. If they didn't, try something differently until they did. Okay, so that was another big part of this. And lastly, the personalization of learning. I was really able to tailor the instruction, the assessments to what they wanted to do. Not as much as I started to do later on, but this really got me thinking beyond the one-size-fits-all approach to teaching a big class of students. All right, drawbacks. This didn't work entirely well in all aspects either. Here's the big setback here is that a lot of them lacked the metacognitive skills they needed in this environment. For instance, setting goals, monitoring progress, reflecting. I didn't actively teach that, so it's no surprise that they didn't do it very well. Okay, I just assumed that they would do this. So that was something that I had to consider moving on. The other thing is difficulty staying focused on a task. They weren't used to this freedom. Okay, there's a lot more freedom and autonomy in this system than in a traditional chalk and talk class. So this was one of the things that I had to consider as well, is how do I keep them focused and on task when they do have more control over their pacing. All right, so I tried again, second attempt. The next year I'd been flipping my class for a full year. It's fall of 2012. I'm trying Flip Mastery again, but I'm going to make it better. So what I started doing is creating daily learning journals, and that's a terrible name. I know I need to get more creative with it. But the whole point was to try to build those metacognitive skills. So we'd have our class warm-up, which was related to some type of content or question related to the unit. And then they would do what's called progress monitoring, where they would have to say how many objectives out of the total in that unit they had mastered. So they would put, say for instance, 0 out of 12, 1 out of 12, 2 out of 12, and they would put that there. Goal setting, they would say what objective they're going to try to achieve that particular day, how they're going to do it. And then at the end of class, they would have to reflect, okay, what did you achieve today and how can you do better tomorrow? I put a link to the document there at the bottom. And also I had students create a video explaining the daily learning journals, which I linked in here that you guys can view later if you wish. Okay, more student choice. That's another thing I tried to do. So beyond the daily learning journals, I wanted to create choice in the classroom. So in this Flip Mastery design, the topics, assignments, and assessments, a lot of them were choice topics. So they could choose whatever topic that they wanted as long as it aligned to the learning objective. So for instance, if the learning objective had to do with taking and defending a position, they would have a lot of options regarding what topic as long as they did that. Same thing with assignments and assessments. And what caused me to start thinking this way was the UDL, or Universal Design for Learning, where you have multiple means of representation, engagement, expression, and it really opened up my classroom to start doing these things a little differently. So this was still Flip Mastery, but they had a lot more choice within the Mastery system. Okay, advantages. So the Flip Mastery reflection, the advantages of this second iteration of Flip Mastery. I felt the students felt a lot more empowered with the more choice of their topic, assignments, and assessment. Okay, they liked having the ability to choose from a few different things. Now, a lot of it may have seemed like a false choice, since maybe none of them they really wanted to do, but just the fact that they have a choice, they enjoyed. And also a lot of it, it was more interesting. They were more motivated to do it sometimes because they got to choose. The daily learning journals definitely helped. They started to build their skills, and even if they didn't do it perfectly all the time, they got practice doing it. Okay, and that's what a lot of us as teachers say, oh, well, they don't have these skills. Well, a lot of us don't teach it either. So I think that it was important for me to try to teach and try to tell these kids how to set a goal and how to achieve it. And if you don't, how to do something differently until you do achieve it. Okay, so that was important for me. Some disadvantages with this. Many students still didn't have that intrinsic motivation to learn. A lot of them were just going through and, okay, Mr. Driscoll, I'll do these objectives so that I'll pass your class. Or I'll do at least, and some even asked me, how many objectives do I need to do this unit to pass? So they were still more focused on earning points than actually learning. So that's something that stuck with me that even to this day I'm still grappling with a bit. So what's next for me? And that's what I've been working on this summer, is coming up with some new ideas. One is called 20 time, or Genius Hour. Some of you may be familiar with that. The other is gamification, or applying game design principles to my classroom. And that's really my next focus with the flipped learning, but we'll come back to that later towards the end of the session. Okay, so this brings us to today's conception of the flipped classroom. And if for people that are maybe a little more experienced with this, you'll probably realize that there's also been a change in the language. A lot of people now refer to it as flipped learning, not the flipped classroom. And that's not just semantics, there's a reason for that. This came out a couple months ago, and this was created by the Flipped Learning Network, and is also part of a blended learning course offered by the Flipped Learning Network in Pearson. So I'm just going to go over this very quickly, but if you are more interested in it, I put a link to their website there. But they're called the Pillars of Flipped Learning. The first one is flexible environments. The second is learning culture. The third is intentional content, and the fourth is professional educators. Okay, again, so I'm going to go through each one of those 4 quickly, but that's the modern definition, I guess you could say, of a flipped learning classroom. Okay, so flexible environments, that means the learning space. Okay, that's one aspect of it is, do you design your independent work, group work, and evaluation? How do you design your classroom experience so that it maximizes those things? One example that I thought was great, I saw this in an ISTE article, I think it was a school in Australia actually. They set up their class like a fireside, a cave, and a watering hole. So for instance, the direct instruction, you go to the fireside. If you want solitude and you want to do some independent thinking on your own, you go to the cave. If you want to collaborate with others, you go to the watering hole. So they set up their class in these different segments, which I thought was a really cool idea. Autonomy, flexible environments. I talked about this a little bit in my own class, but you provide choice regarding when and where they learn the material. Assessments, again, I already built that into my class, but you have flexible assessments that you modify it depending upon what your students need. The second, so the L in FLIP, L stands for students' learning culture, and we want it to be a student-centered learning culture. If you're a flipped classroom or you're in a flipped learning environment, it is not a teacher-centered approach. So if that's your thing and you're not going to waver from teacher-centered learning, then this may not be the right reform for you. It may not be the right approach. But class time is not spent delivering direct instruction to a large group. Okay, that's not how class time is spent. You can still deliver direct instruction at times when they need it, and you can archive direct instruction, but you don't spend most of your class doing this. Students explore topics in greater depth and hopefully in more meaningful learning contexts. And then teachers constantly gauge for understanding. They personalize instruction, and at the end of the day, this is really about the student. Okay, and you try to make it as student-centered as possible. So that's the shift in the learning culture. And John and Aaron summed it up perfectly this way. They said, flipped learning is not about flipping when and where it's delivered. It's flipping the attention away from the teacher and towards the learner. And I think that really sums up the idea of the learning culture well. Okay, so the I for flip, and again, I know I'm going quickly, but again, this is all archived. You'll have access to the video and also the PowerPoint. Okay, so intentional content. Direct instruction is evaluated, and if considered an effective tool, shifted online. That means don't just make a video of every lecture that you think of. You have to carefully evaluate if this is going to be good and if the students are going to use it. So for instance, I created this screencast about September 11th and the Taliban because I realized last year I'm teaching students that can't remember 9/11. And that's kind of crazy to think of, but it's true. That's history to them. So I thought that would be a good use of an instructional video. But not everything is. Okay, now beyond video, people think flipping is just about videos. You can use a whole slew of different direct instruction strategies. For instance, use games and simulations. I just went to a Games and Education Symposium in New York, which was amazing. And they showed how you can use existing games within your curriculum. That's not exactly gamification, by the way, but you can use things like Minecraft or science simulations, or there are some from iCivics, which are perfect for social studies teachers. I would definitely check out icivics.org if you are a civics or government or even American history teacher, because there's some great games there. But anyway, you find things and you curate. You don't have to create everything. You can curate content that the students can learn from. And again, carefully consider the value of each video. Not everything is best taught via a lecture. Okay, for instance, driving. If you were just taught how to drive from a lecture and you got behind the wheel, you probably wouldn't drive very well. So there are things that they need to practice you can't just teach with a lecture. And also, don't be afraid to start by using other people's videos. I tell people all the time, you can use the videos on my channel if you want, but eventually you should start creating your own. Partially because you have a relationship with your students where, I forgot who says, but they said it was a social contract between you and your kids, that you're their teacher and you're going to help them learn. So at some point you should be in these videos to try to help them. You don't have to be, but eventually it would help. Okay, and the P stands for professional educators. You have to be reflective. As you can see in my own practice, I've been reflecting in the last few years doing this. You have to connect with each other. You have to accept constructive criticism, and you have to tolerate controlled classroom chaos. Okay, so again, you have to reflect, connect with others, accept criticism, and tolerate a little bit of chaos. And a lot of those things are not easy for teachers, particularly the criticism part in the classroom chaos, but trust me, it's going to help you out tremendously. If anything, I wish I was criticized in class more. I would like more evaluations. I would like more people to come in and say, you're doing this or that wrong. And partially, part of connecting with others is you can have this dialogue and this conversation, which is great that what we're doing right now. Okay, we're connecting with other people from around the world, and hopefully after this seminar, we can stay connected and try to keep pursuing this and making our practice better. So, some ways to join the community of flipped learning. There's a Ning that I have the flipped learning Ning that I have a link to here. It has I think it's over 14,000 members now. So think about that, 14,000 teachers around the world are joining this. As well as on Twitter, there's a flipped class chat, and then of course the course that we set up for this eSeminar, which I'll provide a link for again later. Okay, so results. How do we know that flipped learning works? Well, there is still very new reform, so there's not a whole lot of research out there yet. But one of them is a flipped learning study that I did through my program at Columbia. I put a link to the full study there if interested. But these are some of the findings, and I'm not going to go through everything. But first, when you flip your classroom, it democratizes it. And what I mean by democratizes is it opens up to student control, student choice, active learning experiences, and the biggest part of it is student ownership of learning, that you're really shifting the ownership to them and you're helping them learn instead of the ownership on you telling them things to learn. And that's a huge shift, and I think that's great. I had a survey of about 500 students in about 30 different school districts around the country, and these are some of the results I got back, which I thought were very promising. For instance, 79% of students have more frequent interactions with peers and positive interactions. 78 have better interactions with their teacher. And then the last one, look there, 83% of students say that their learning is more active and experiential, which is great. The teachers themselves had positive results too. 96 reported that positive interactions with students have increased, that they are working and learning with their students in a way they haven't before. And then 96% say that they're differentiating and personalizing instruction. So basically, almost everybody that does this personalizes their instruction and has a better relationship with their students. Now, beyond my research, the Flipped Learning Network just completed some great research. It's called the Review of Flipped Learning. They also have a white paper, literature review, and an executive summary. And this is just some awesome stuff. I forget exactly which college, which professors ran this study, but they looked at all the literature and research that's out there up to this summer. So if you're looking for the hard data and the research for, say, you're doing your own research, definitely check those documents out because there's some great stuff in there. Then Clintondale High School, you may not be familiar with this, but there was a school that flipped every class in the entire high school with incredible results. If you look here, 33% reduction in failure rates in English, all the way across the board. Discipline dropped by 66%. And the principal there, Greg Green, he's actually providing an eSeminar next week in this platform, but he shows that if flipping on a large scale can have positive results as well. Okay, implementation. Yes, maybe you're convinced that flipped learning might work, but how do you do it? So this is a very quick guide to how to get started. First, what is your video going to be for? And I have samples there of ways you can do it. Those links there also go to YouTube videos with a sample for each. But you could have a regular content-based lecture, but you could also have concept introductions. You could model skills. You could review for tests. You could create different leveled videos depending on the level of your students. You could have tech tutorials. For instance, I made one on how to make a screencast because my students make videos themselves. Assignment instructions. Addressing misconceptions is great, especially for science teachers, but social studies teachers can use it as well. The last one is Inquiry Hook. I'm really interested in that. And Ramsey Masalam, who's an excellent educator out in San Francisco, he had a TED Talk recently. And his whole thing is about confusion and inquiry early. So that's another way that you could use videos. All right. So to start, do you ever find yourself repeating instruction over and over again? That could be a way you start doing this. If you're sick of saying it in class, maybe you can just start by making a frequently asked question video library. So how do you make the videos? I prefer Camtasia Studio. There's Screencast-O-Matic works, but you can also do that through things like, I think QuickTime has its own screen recording, and there's a lot out there. So you just have to choose one of the screen recording options. The second step is publishing. Once you have your video created, you have to publish it somewhere. Your students have to be able to see it. I prefer YouTube, but Vimeo also works, screencast.com. There's a few out there, but I prefer YouTube. The only reason I use Vimeo sometimes is because YouTube is blocked in my district. All right, once you have your video posted, some people like to share it in different ways with a blog. You can have a wiki, a Google site, but a lot of people are moving towards learning management systems such as EDU on Go, and that's what I use. Okay, that's the learning management system that I think is best right now, and it's getting better and better. So, and actually the course that's set up for this, that is the learning management system that I use for mine. It's very quick to set up. So the sample learning management system that I have there is a link to Flip Social Studies. Anybody can access any of my courses. I'll let you look at them and see what they look like from the inside, from the student view. Just contact me through email. I'll send you the join code, and you can take a look at how that's set up. Now, how do you know that your kids learned from the video? That's a big question that comes up over and over again. One thing that I do is I create guided viewing questions and notes. Okay, so I might have specific questions or notes, and maybe they have to come up with questions themselves. The other way is online quizzes. I create Google Forms for this, but some people do in-class quizzes. But what's nice about Google Forms is you can embed scripts. For instance, the Fluber script, if you have multiple choice questions, it can grade it automatically for you. You can set up a key. And it's also great for item analysis and all of that. So those are some links there as well to how do you assess the videos. All right, now this is going to come up a lot, and a lot of people ask me questions about it. How do you address resistance to change from students, from parents, from administrators, and then, of course, the implementation dip. A lot of times when you implement a new change, it gets worse before it gets better. That's going to change depending on your situation. I can't tell you exactly how everyone's going to respond in your situation, but what I do want you to keep in mind, though, is that always address people that this is for student engagement, to work with students, to improve your relationship with them. It's not about you as a teacher. It's not about the technology. It's about the kids. Okay, and if you have any specific questions about pushback you're getting from any one of those groups, please contact me, and we can have a further discussion on that. Okay, the community of practice. Okay, we're going to try to wrap up in the next 5 minutes or so we can get to questions. A couple ways to do that. First, the Flip Social Studies course that a lot of you have already signed up for. Please engage with each other through that. I have a ton of resources that I'm going to show you guys right before the question section. So, we'll go through that. The Twitter, if you go on Twitter, there's a Flip Class chat that you can follow. That's on Monday nights at 8 Eastern Time. And then, of course, there's Google Hangouts, which I engage in regularly. I have a link there to some of the ones for history. I also have a few social studies teachers that I work with quite a bit. And I had them actually create quick 2 to 3 minute videos introducing themselves and how they flipped their classes. So that's included in this presentation. The video links, I'm not going to play them now, but you can access those. They're also in the course in the Educator Spotlight section, so I would definitely check those out. I created a document about 1.5 years ago with the Flip Social Studies community. Over 140 teachers that teach social studies have added their information to this document, and it has their contact information, where they teach, what level of flipping they do, access to their video libraries. It's really an awesome resource, so I would suggest clicking there once you get access to this presentation. Add your own information as well. Please add to the document. We're trying to grow this community. Also, a book came out this week from 20 different educators from around the country, a few of them social studies teachers, including myself, that wrote chapters about how they flipped their class, their journey. Mine's about student-centered tech integration, but there's also 2 by Carl Ingren Stryker who else did the social studies? Oh, Jason Bressman. He's also the one that compiled this, but he wrote one on social studies as well. A lot of great stuff there. You can click that for information on that book, but that just came out this week. And moving forward, where do we go from here? A lot of people say, and I agree, flipped learning is a stepping stone towards inquiry, away from this content-based lecture model towards an inquiry-based learning system. One way people are doing this with an explore, flip, apply approach. So instead of even starting with a video, you start with an explore phase. You get them interested. You start to have them do some inquiry-based activities first. Then you flip your class. Then you end with an apply phase, which I think is a really cool model, and that's credited to Ramsey and Masalam. 20 time, that's something that I've started in my classroom. I mentioned it earlier on. A lot of it's inspired by Google's 20% time with their employees, but also opening up for innovation, for creativity, allowing students to pursue their passions, and I included an article about 20 time there. And then gamification. This is kind of my new thing that I'm getting into, and that's designing coursework as a game. Lee Sheldon, which is an incredible educator out of RPI, wrote this book last year, and I think this is just great. And a lot of it's not a whole lot different from Flip Mastery, but you're taking game design principles like leveling and guilds and points through attrition, and that will try to increase motivation to do well in your course. So that's another thing that's on the horizon. All right, some final thoughts before I show you the course quick. We need to move away from teacher use of technology for content delivery. Okay, I think that really needs to happen. And it's funny that a lot about flipped learning is about content delivery through technology, but really it's what we do in classroom after we do this shift. Okay, and how students can use this. And I think we need to move towards an environment where students are using technology to collaborate, to solve problems, to question, and that's what we're trying to get to. So hopefully if flipped learning can get you to start thinking about how to make this shift, then I think it's been a success. And then lastly, it's not just about technology. For instance, Google Glass is one of the new things, and everybody's all psyched about it. Teachers get involved with the technology craze all the time, but it's not just about the tech. Very quick example from my home. I had one example where I was holding my daughter. My son was playing on ABC Mouse and watching Dino Dan, and the phone's out and the computer's out, and all this tech going on. And my daughter started to cry a little bit, and I was wondering why. And the reason why, everyone's paying attention to this technology. No one was paying attention to her. She just wanted someone to connect with her. And when you do, this is what she looks like. She's happy. It's a relationship, and that's big. Don't forget about the relationships you have either with your family or with your students. It's not just technology. It's about how you can use this to build better relationships. So again, connect with your students and use technology to help you do that. Okay, well that's basically it. I'll take questions in 1 second. I just want to really quickly show you the course itself and some of the things that I put in it. Okay, so I have my welcome screen here with contact information. The eSeminar archive is going to go right here. If you want access to the presentation I just gave, this is where to find it. I'm also going to put the video into this topic. I have a section on how to develop flipped learning experience. So how do you get started with this? Some videos that I've created and others have created around the country. How to create instructional videos. I have a guide in there on how to do that. It's kind of a step-by-step guide to create videos along with examples in here. The new book, information about Flipping 2.0. Videos, blogs. I have a ton of videos from other people that are just incredible educators around the United States and even world that do this. Educator Spotlight. This is where the videos of the social studies teachers are going to be if you want to check those out. And then how to connect. I have that community document I was mentioning with over the 140 teachers. Add your information to that. And then also some people to follow on Twitter that I think are very influential. Okay, so if that being said, I can take some questions.
Okay, Tom, you can hear me, right?
Yep.
Okay, sorry about interrupting you with that comment about Captivate. So let's see. Here's a question that someone asked. You said all students would do at home is watch videos. Do you think the practice in class is enough?
Okay, could you say that again? Is it what was the question?
You were talking about all people do at home is, all they're going to do at home. The only part that students do at home is to watch the videos, and they do practical things in class. So question is, do you think that in-class practice time is enough? Or do you also offer additional activities and assignments?
Yeah, typically if you're in that initial stage of flipping, a lot of people assign the videos to watch at home. I actually do not assign homework. The videos they can watch in class when they're ready. And really it's some of them may not even need to watch a video. If they don't need the video to accomplish the objective or to learn in class, it's not necessary.
Of course, they've got the textbook to read as well.
Yeah,
right?
if they can, and actually one AP student asked me last year, they said, can I just read the chapter instead of watching your video? And I said, sure. If you learn better by reading the chapter, then go for it. So it's really just about what helps them learn and really adapting it to your kids and what they need. That's a little bit of a sidestep to the question, but that's just the way I use it. I do not require it for homework.
I think that's a good answer to the question. So let's see. There was a question here that you answered after it was asked. Let's see. How long are these classes to complete all of those steps? In other words, all of the daily learning log steps. How long do you spend in a session during the
Okay.
day? I think that's
So
what the
I'll answer how
question
long
is.
my daily sessions are as well as my units. So I see kids for 50 minutes a day. So typically we'll have a warm up of about 5 to 10 minutes where they do the warm up and also do the progress monitoring and goal setting. Then for about a half hour they'll work independently typically, and then I'll circulate and provide direct instruction to the kids that need it. And then the reflections, typically the last 5 to 10 minutes of class, we'll bring it in. I might do a whole class activity to round up, and then they do their reflection. A whole unit, I may have about 12 to 14 big objectives for a 6-week unit, which is actually less than a lot of other teachers do. Some teachers have like 30 objectives per unit, but I try to narrow it down to the most basic ones that I know that they need.
Okay, next question. Are there any assessments that all students have to complete? For example, modeled on standardized testing.
Yes, particularly in my AP class. I teach AP European History, so we definitely do released items from College Board. Typically, that's on my summative assessments. My formative ones are really personalized, but I still do some summative tests that are the same, but they are based on objectives, not necessarily content. So a lot of it's skill-based, so they could have all done different topics, but I'll assess that skill at the end on the summative test.
This is a question about something you said but wasn't fully caught. You said the class was set up into caves, watering hole, and fireside. This person didn't catch the meaning of fireside. Could you repeat the definition of
Yeah,
those?
so fireside, I guess traditionally in like the early days of human, that's where you would go and listen to the elders, and you gather around the fire. So in a way, that's kind of like our direct instruction model now, where you have the whole group and you have the sage on stage, and that can be useful sometimes. But that would be your area of direct instruction, and the other two are more for group work and solitary thinking.
Okay, great. So cave is when they're working on their own projects themselves. The fireside is when they're working together collaborative. I mean, the watering hole is collaborative, and the fireside is when the sage on the mountain is talking to them. The know-it-all teacher. No. So then there's a question here. Did you try to use any engagement models such as problem-based learning or inquiry-driven?
I have not, but I want to, and I know people who do. If you're interested in that, I would definitely connect with Ramsey Masalam. I have a video of him at his TED Talk and then also a Camtasia video in the course. The other person to follow is Carl Lindgren Stryker. He's one of the educators in the spotlight, and he does a PBL style where he doesn't even do content videos. It's all inquiry, it's all skills, and the Explore, Flip, Apply method is inquiry-based. It's all based on learning cycles where you start with inquiry, you have some direct instruction when they need it, and then you apply the knowledge. So people are doing it. I would just look up Flip Learning plus PBL. You'll find a ton of information out there.
Okay, so another question. Do all students have a date to finish a unit?
Yes, and the way it works is if students finish early, they can work on their 20 time projects, which is where they get to completely choose their topic and do some research. So that's the incentive to get done early. For those that are not done, they basically have to take the summative assessment, and I grade them based on how many objectives that they completed. So it's a self-paced unit, but the units do have end dates. I do know some teachers, though, and even some schools where it's not that way. It's you just completely go self-paced throughout the year. I don't do that. I don't know if I'd want to do that, but it can be done. But typically after 6 weeks, depending on where they are in the unit, we'll have our summative, and then we'll start another one.
Okay, I'm sorry about the noise there. I can't find the mute button. I would have muted it. I had a jet fly over. So I hope people heard that answer. So another question. Any data showing a correlation between flipped learning and better results on standardized
Yes,
testing?
and I would refer you to the Clintondale High School and Greg Green, who is doing his presentation next week, actually. But he has a lot of state assessment data I believe out of Michigan, showing the before and after when he flipped. Also, the Flip Learning Network literature review and white paper, which I referenced in this presentation, has a lot of links to hard data based on assessments.
Okay, so here's another question. I love the concept of flipped learning, but I'm overwhelmed. What at the most basic level can I do to get started?
I would say just start with the Flip 101, where you just identify one thing that you would like to shift, one type of direct instruction, whether it be lecture or otherwise, that you would like to try shifting online, and just start with one lesson. See how it goes. Then maybe try a unit at the end of the year. And then if you're going to flip a whole class, you might need the summer or a couple years. I mean, John and Aaron, who wrote the first class, really the first book that came out on this, it took them 5 years to get to where they are now. A lot of people that start later, it took me 3 years to get where I am now, but it takes a while to build up. So don't get overwhelmed. I mean, just start with flipping 1 or 2 lessons here or there, then start with a unit and just build up.
Would let me ask you this: would it be a more practical approach if they first started to use a say, like they created an EDU on Go site, course site that would simply provide information like assignments and due dates and reference material?
Yeah, and what's nice about that's a nice place to start too, because you can start by curating content. You can curate a bunch of videos. For instance, I use the Crash Course World History a lot with my AP kids. I didn't make all those, so you can maybe start with a flipped lesson, or another good place is it's called TED Ed, TED-Ed. If you look that up, they have pre-made videos and video lessons already. So maybe start by assigning one of those. And use other videos, curate them, put them into your learning management system, such as the EDU on Go course, and then you can start building your own collection of videos.
Right. I was thinking if they started with to build the environment first, then they could gradually ease into the process by doing it, little bit at a time.
Yeah, and it wouldn't be as big of a shock to the students.
When they get real comfortable.
Yeah, it wouldn't be as big of a shock to the students either. If they already have an online learning environment, once you start having the videos, it wouldn't be as big of a change because they're already used to it.
Right. And I understand that EDU on Go is going to set up a template for that. So people who want to get information, that should email me, and I'll respond to them when I find out that's set up. I'll let them know. Let's see, one more question. Is student peer learning encouraged in flipped learning? So in other words, they got together and they did a lot of collaboration. Do you see that as a key component of flipped learning?
Absolutely. And actually, if you're familiar with, I think it's Eric Mazur, he's the person from Harvard who came up or really advanced this idea of peer instruction in class. And one of the people he works with, I think her name is Jessie Shell maybe, but she actually presented at the Flipped Learning Conference this year on how to do flipped learning and peer instruction. There are also a few teachers from the Midwest who presented on that. So if you looked up peer instruction and flipped learning, there is a lot out there. For instance, you could you have your video, and then at the beginning of class you could ask a question related to it, and then students would have to, come up with an answer, and then the class would vote, but then you'd have to convince other people in class of what the answer might be, and there's a lot of ways to do that. I know another teacher who does flipped learning, and he has what's called consulting slips, and students can collect them and use them to get help from other students, and it's kind of a crazy setup, but yeah, you can definitely do peer instruction, and once you flip your class, there's so much more opportunities to do peer instruction, and I think that's the beauty of this, is you could do inquiry-based learning, peer instruction, gamification. It's really whatever you'd like to pursue. It just opens up the doors for you.
Right. So if we actually, if you think about it, you made the comment about one of the primary components of the concept of flipped learning is moving the teacher out of the center and moving students more toward the center. So that would really be how that happens when learners are active together. That would be the opposite of the teacher being the center of the class, right? Okay. Well, I think that's all of the questions. Let's see if I missed anything. Let's see. I don't see that I missed any. Is there any questions from people out there?
Well, someone just asked
Um,
about the
any more
archive,
questions?
and yes, this whole video I'm screencasting at actually right now. So I'll render this in Camtasia and I'll get it up into the course within the next day or two.
Are you still there, Tom? One of the things is every time somebody joins or leaves, we get this beep which cuts you off.
Okay, I was just saying that the
So
whole video will be archived in the course. I'm going to upload this entire video tomorrow.
great, that's wonderful. And that's particularly especially good because I forgot to click record with Join Me. So yeah, thank you, Tom. All right, so I guess that's going to be it then. Thank you very much, Tom. It was a great presentation, and I hope that we get more questions on the your community. It's going to be great.
Yeah, please, everybody that's listening right now, just keep the conversation going in the course on Twitter. Just contact. Let's just kind of keep this rolling. So it was great talking with everybody.
I do see one more question. One more question. Is it possible to have access to one of your courses that you flipped?
Yes, I will give everybody access to the World History course, and that is on flippsocialstudies.com. If you email me at thdriscoll@gmail.com, which is, I think, everywhere in this, actually right there on the screen right now. So it's thdriscoll@gmail.com. Email me that you'd like access. Let me know what your login name will be, just so I know that you're not one of the students. And I'm still building it. One thing you may notice is a little different is I'm going to change the terminology to more like gamification stuff, so it'll say level and all that. But you'll still get the idea of how Flip Mastery works and how I use EDU on Go to host the site.
Okay, great. Well, I think it's now 10:59. So I think we'll end this session, and if there isn't any more questions hanging out there, and if you don't have anything else to say, Tom,
No, I'd just like to thank everyone for joining us today.
thank you all very much.